Welcome to the night shift. Date invited me to a fake barbecue and then wouldn't let me leave. House had a soundproof music studio in the basement. I'm so sorry this is so long. Maybe I included too much detail. I don't know. I don't post very often. I'll put a TLDR at the end. This took place a while ago, 2015-ish, but I'll probably never forget it. I, around 21 at the time, female, was still fairly new in my city. I had just gotten out of a bad relationship, wasn't in the best place mentally, and didn't know a lot of people in town besides my ex and his friends. I was on a dating/hookup app looking for people to hang out casually with, maybe find friends with benefits or something. I had matched a 25-year-old guy, Simon. We talked sporadically in the app for a few days. He explained he was in a band and living in a house with his bandmates. He sent me their music. It was just audio on YouTube with a heavy edited still image of 4 or 5 guys playing rock instruments. One of them looked like him. The music was an interesting combination of styles and not really for me, but whatever. He seemed like a nice enough guy. He stopped replying for a few days and I figured that was that. Moved on. Then one day I was at work and I got a message from him saying sorry, he'd been busy, and inviting me to a barbecue with his friends and bandmates in their yard. He had explained that their band manager was providing them with a house to live in. Based on the lack of views on the YouTube video and the fact I only saw one photo of him playing in the band, I figured he was probably exaggerating the band manager thing. I thought it was more likely something along the lines of a bar manager friend giving them a discount on rent in exchange for being a house band at their bar or something, and I didn't think much of it beyond that. Normally, I would have just said no to going to a barbecue alone at a home of someone I really didn't know. But I was really bored and figured I might be able to overcome some social anxiety and maybe even make some female friends there since he had made it sound like a pretty big party. I put the neighborhood he gave me into maps and it was a suburban area with lots of families as far as I knew. I figured being in a yard on such a nice summer day wouldn't be overly risky because lots of neighbors would be outside. Plus, it was just a few train stops away from my workplace, and I was off in a few hours. I did tell him I wasn't overly comfortable with the idea since I didn't know him well, but I would stop by for a bit if I didn't need to go inside the house at all. He said that was totally fine, which made me feel a lot better. I even made sure not to drink anything for the rest of my shift so I wouldn't be risking needing to go inside to use the bathroom. I was anxious about just showing up to a barbecue with people I didn't know at all, as he implied that the event was already underway. Plus, I would have had a hard time finding a specific address from the backyard side, so I asked Simon if he could meet me at the train station since he had said it was a quick walk anyway. He agreed to do that, and I let him know when I was leaving work and what time maps said the train would get to his station. I sent Simon a message to tell him that I'd arrived at the train station around 5:30 after I looked around and couldn't find him. He told me he was running behind and just to start walking toward the neighborhood. I was about halfway across the massive train station parking lot when I saw him slowly wandering toward me. I recognized his clothes, wearing bell-bottoms when they were not common, especially for men, and long hair from far away. But up close his face looked pretty different from his photos. It might have been some heavy-duty editing, I don't even know, but he kinda looked like a different guy. Older looking than the 25-year-old guy in the photos by 5 or 10 years. Maybe used some photos of his brother or something, I don't even know. It was before AI. This was the first real red flag, but I brushed it off. Maybe he's just self-conscious, maybe he smokes a lot and doesn't wear sunscreen and hasn't taken pictures in a while. All of his pictures looked candid, so I figured he wasn't much of a selfie guy. And besides, I'm mostly here to make friends anyway, so I shouldn't judge his appearance so harshly. He was also clearly already drunk, but a lot of my ex's friends were heavy drinkers, so that didn't seem strange. He's hosting a barbecue after all. The second red flag came shortly after when we arrived at the front door. I reminded him that I wasn't comfortable going inside the house, but he assured me we would just have to walk through to get to the backyard. Okay, fine. It wasn't the kind of neighborhood where you could just walk around the house to get to the backyard. We would have had to backtrack to the main road to go down the alley directly to the backyard. I figured he just forgot what I said about not wanting to go inside and didn't want to cause a bunch of trouble, so I went with it. We got in the house and he immediately closed the door and locked the deadbolt and knob behind me. I didn't think that was too weird, since nobody was hanging out inside and a lot of people are just in the habit of locking the door when they come in, but it did still give me the heebie-jeebies for some reason. Then Simon told me he'd really like to give me a tour of the house. I politely declined and reminded him that I was just there for the barbecue. He said that he and his bandmates had worked really hard to get the house and he was really proud of it. At that point, I was getting really skeptical because usually when guys would tell me things that seemed a bit far-fetched, they'd let the truth slip by the time they got me into their house. But still, I convinced myself I was being unreasonable. I was already in the stupid house anyway. He insisted it'd be quick. Not the wisest choice, I know, but I was pretty good at explaining away red flags. So at this point, Simon still mostly had a dopey, stoner art guy kind of vibe as far as I was concerned. He really didn't seem like a threat, just an insecure oddball who sucks at communicating and fibs a bit. Not unlike my ex, who was definitely emotionally and verbally abusive, but it never escalated past that. I figured at worst he'd get handsy and I'd get called a prude for not sleeping with him. I didn't have a lot of self-worth at the time, obviously, so I went with it. The tour started pretty uneventfully, other than that the decor in the common areas was obviously chosen by a middle-aged Martha Stewart enthusiast and not a bunch of guys in a band or their fake band manager. I didn't know if this should make me feel better or worse. On one hand, he was clearly lying, but on the other, it made me think it was probably just someone's mum's house and she was out of town and he didn't want to tell me he lived at a friend's parents' home and didn't actually have a paying job. Again, total red flag, but I could rationalize it at the time. The bedroom doors were all closed. Bathroom was unremarkable. He then showed me the kitchen and I finally saw through the window that there was nobody in the backyard. There weren't even barbecue supplies around. No burgers thawing on the counter, no cocktail supplies lying around. Nothing. I asked him where everyone was and why he'd lied about the barbecue, and he told me that his bandmates were on tour still. They were just running behind due to van trouble, but they should soon be back any minute so we could start the party. I asked him why he wasn't on tour with them if he's in the band. I don't even remember what his answer was to that because it didn't make any sense. At this point, I'm out of mental gymnastics to convince myself that this guy isn't completely full of shit, and I'm really freaked out. Took me long enough, I'm smarter now, don't worry. I started trying to figure out a way to get out of this situation. I'd hoped that once he was done with the tour, we could go outside, even just for a minute, and I'd just leave. I'd been in some sketchy situations in the past, but luckily nothing so bad that they tried very hard to physically stop me when I walked away in a semi-public place. I just wasn't comfortable doing it inside the house. I knew this guy was full of shit, but I had no idea how much worse it would get. I instinctively pretended to believe his bullshit. He offered me a beer. I said no thanks because I had to work in the morning. He said okay and cracked one for himself. Then he wanted to take the tour downstairs. I could see from the top of the stairs that the basement was the dark and creepy kind with really small windows, so I refused. I asked if we could go back outside. He said after the tour. I tried to argue about going into the basement. I told him I have a spider phobia, don't like basements, etc. All lies, but anything that wouldn't let him realize that he was what I was afraid of. He started to get agitated about my reluctance, so I figured it would be better to just let him show me the damn basement and then hopefully we could go outside because I really didn't know what else to do. The basement was fairly unremarkable. Couch, TV, elliptical, until I noticed something that gave me chills. The house was probably built in the 1990s or late 80s at the absolute earliest, but I saw a door that looked just like the heavy foam-lined door to the cold storage room in my grandma's house, the kind that only opened from the outside. It was just a smaller version of the big metal doors on commercial walk-in fridges. It looked really out of place in this house. I would absolutely not go anywhere near that door. He opened it and told me it was their soundproof music studio. I looked inside from a few meters away. It did indeed look soundproof. It was about the size of a bedroom, and I could see a few guitars and amps in it, mattress toppers on the walls, no drum kit or recording equipment that I could see. He insisted I go inside to get a better look. He was standing outside the door motioning for me to go inside. Holy shit, the alarm bells are really going off now. At this point, I realized I could totally die here if I'm not careful, and I turned around to run up the stairs. He closed the door and followed me, asking what's wrong, acting like I'm being all unreasonable for not wanting to see his soundproof music studio. So I'm realizing that this is a way sketchier situation than any of my ex's bullshit, and I'm freaked right out. At that point, my main objective was getting out of the house. The front and back doors were both closed and locked, so if I tried to run, he'd be able to get to me before I could get the locks open. The bathroom did not have a window. The house had a convoluted floor plan that I wasn't familiar with, and he was much bigger than I am. He was the tall, lanky type who could run fast even if they're out of shape and smoke a pack a day. I pretended that I was okay with hanging out with him in hopes that he'd chill out a bit. We made small talk for a few minutes. He cracked another beer and thankfully he calmed down. I desperately mentioned yet again that it was beautiful outside and suggested we go sit in the yard while we wait. He said no and started to get agitated that I wanted to leave already. I told him that I could stay, but I'd just really like to smoke a cigarette. He told me we could smoke cigarettes inside and pointed to a cereal bowl full of cigarette butts. God damn it. We sat down at the table and lit some cigarettes. As he was smoking, he started rolling a joint, which he promptly lit as soon as his cig was done. He offered me some and I said no thanks. He insisted, so I took the smallest puff I could. I'm a pretty seasoned weed smoker, but I pretended to cough excessively and told him I'm a novice, so that's more than enough for me. For a liar himself, he thankfully wasn't very good at picking up on lies of others. After we smoked, he asked if I'd like to watch a movie until his bandmates get back. I told him that I was really looking forward to spending the day outside and suggested we go for a walk or visit the park, ideas he did not like or appreciate. At this point, I was trying to keep as much distance as possible between us, but he stayed close enough to me that I could smell the beer on his breath. He grabbed me by the waist and I backed away and asked about the barbecue food to try and change the subject and make him think I still believed what he was telling me. He started to get angry again and sternly reiterated that his bandmates should be home any minute, and my anxiety was absolutely through the roof. I tried to calm him down again with generic small talk. Now, I don't know how I got so lucky, but the next thing that happened might have saved me. Simon went to the fridge to get another beer and pulled out an empty box. At this point, he's getting even more pissed off than before, so I went out on a limb and suggested we go and get some more beers for the party, because I was out of ideas. I was terrified that it would enrage him even more to suggest, once again, that we leave the house, but I had to try. Thankfully though, his eyes lit up with the possibility that I could actually be down to drink with him, and he agreed. As we were walking to the liquor store, I still didn't really have a plan because I was no longer comfortable just walking away from this fucking menace in this weirdly desolate suburb. But I was extremely relieved to be out of that house. I walked with him to the liquor store and when we got there, told him I don't need to go inside if he was just gonna go grab some beer. He insisted that I had to go inside. At that point, I was so stressed and frazzled, I just went with him and hoped that a good opportunity to leave would arise. When we got inside the liquor store, he asked what kind of beer I wanted. I reminded him that I had work tomorrow and didn't want to drink much. He demanded to know what kind of beer I wanted, so I just named the first one that came to mind. We went to pay. The cashier was kind of an asshole, so I didn't ask for help. I probably should have, but I panicked and didn't. I hoped there might be somebody in the parking lot who might help me if I made a scene, but there was nobody. I really regretted not asking the liquor store guy for help, but also remembered the times my ex told people I was crazy so they wouldn't take me seriously. Liquor store guy definitely seemed like he would have fell for that, so probably for the best I didn't expect him to help me. I had one last idea before I took my chances just trying to run or scream. There was a drugstore across from the liquor store. I told Simon I had to go and buy a toothbrush or some shit that vaguely implied I might stay over. He eagerly agreed to this, but tried to follow me into the store. I told him that you're not allowed to bring beer into a drugstore. I don't know if that's even true. I really doubt it's any kind of law, but luckily this drunk douchebag believed it and agreed to wait outside. Now, my naive ass thought maybe I could just wander around this drugstore for long enough and he would either get the hint or get sketched out or bored and leave. But no, I must have wandered around the store for at least half an hour and this jackass is just still standing there staring in the window. This creep didn't even have his phone out. Every time I checked if he was still there, he was just staring through the window, looking at me. I didn't feel like I had anybody I could call in the city to come and help me. The cops here don't usually take things like this very seriously, and the store workers looked like they were mostly high school students, and I didn't want to drag them into this, so I really didn't feel like I had a lot of options. After being in there for so long, I was surprised he didn't come in to see what was taking me so long. I thought maybe I could lose him in the aisles and sneak out of the store if he did come in, but nope. I ended up hovering around the tills and waited until a big group of friendly looking people were paying. I followed them out of the store and immediately told Simon to leave me alone and go home. I said it firmly and loudly enough to imply that I would make a scene if need be. Simon looked at the people getting in their car who were now pausing and looking at us because I'd nearly yelled at him, and then he just turned around and left. It was bizarrely anticlimactic, which I was very thankful for. I ran to the train station, which thankfully was in a different direction than his house from the store, and I never heard from him again. When I got home, his app profile had either blocked me or been deleted. Years later, after I stopped compartmentalizing the whole thing, I wish I would have reported him or something. It bothers me to wonder if he tried it again with someone else but made sure the fridge was stocked first. But at the time, I didn't think anybody would take me seriously. I was embarrassed of my choices, and I just wanted to move on from the whole thing. Plus, all I really had was a likely fake first name and a general idea of where the house was, which probably wasn't even his. I'll probably never know any more than I do now, and maybe that's for the best. Anyway, Simon, you lying piece of shit, let's not meet. Worst Hinge date I've ever been on. I told my friends what I'm about to tell you, and they urged me to share it here. It happened back in December, about a week before Christmas. I'm a 32-year-old guy currently using my GI Bill to go to college in a city in one of the mountain time zone states. I'm so busy with school and work, so I don't have time to go out and socialize often, so I have to rely a lot on the apps to go on dates. I matched with this really cute girl around my age. We had a good convo and then we scheduled a date. It was at a bar restaurant not far from either of us to drive, so it was easy. She was very pretty in person and we got along great. During our conversation, I found out that she worked in a non-cop role at the police station, like a receptionist essentially. I also learned she had a roommate whom she said was out of town for the holidays. She added that she hated being alone because she had a crazy ex-boyfriend who stalked her. I was a little uneasy at that and told her as much, and she said he's harmless, so I kinda let it go. We had a few more drinks and were there about another hour, and at her suggestion, she said we should go back to her place. And I mean, I wasn't going to argue it, she was hot. She then insisted on driving. I told her I was fine and she said no, that I had been drinking and she saw too many DUIs at her job. I got what she was saying, but I only had 2 gin and tonics and was fine, and again she insisted. I thought it was weird, but I didn't care. We went to her house and she walked up and just opened the door. She didn't lock it, it was already open, which I found very odd because she said she had a stalker and that her roommate was gone. She started feeding her cat, and as she was doing that, I saw a bowl of cereal on the kitchen counter. I touched it and it was still cold, like it hadn't been there for a while. The cereal wasn't soggy either. I asked her whose it was, and she hesitated and said she ate it as a snack before heading to the bar. It just didn't make any sense, and before I could say anything, she just kissed me and put her arms around me seductively and said for me to take her to her room. Again, she was pretty hot, and I quit caring about the cereal. We started fooling around, and I went to close the curtains, and she told me to leave them open. A few minutes later, maybe 5, we were in bed and my back was to the window, and she let out a huge gasp. A scared gasp. Her eyes were at the window. I turned around and saw someone in a hoodie and they took off. I heard the steps running on her back deck. I immediately jumped up and ran to make sure her doors were locked, and of course the front door wasn't. I ran to it and locked it. Right when I did, the door started banging. I went to open it because I was gonna fuck the dude up, or try to, and she told me just to go back to bed with her. I screamed at her and asked her if she was insane, and she told me he does this and goes away. And I asked her, "You know this is your ex?" And she said yeah, and not to worry about it. At this point, he started banging on the side of the house at the other end, and she didn't seem at all scared and kept trying to get me to go back to her bed. I didn't want to call the cops because for all I know this dude is a cop, or she'd know the cops that showed up and would take her side. I also couldn't leave because my car was at the bar and I was terrified. At this point, I started calling her out for the door not being locked. The serial, I openly called her a liar. She couldn't come up with any logical answers and I had no idea what I was into. I shouldn't have done this, but my fight or flight was pretty much kicked in and I told her, if this is a robbery or some kind of setup, I promise you, I will kill you both. I'm not a hard ass or anything, but my fear told me to let her know that no matter what it was, they'd have a fight on their hands. My thoughts of what were going to happen to me were all over the place. I ordered an Uber off my phone and didn't tell her. I just kept arguing with her and asking what was going on, hoping to just keep her talking and in the room. I stayed right next to the door so I could leave ASAP. Luckily, I never got my pants off and my jacket and shoes were right by the door, so I was able to get dressed. The Uber showed up and without saying anything, I just opened the door and ran out as fast as I could. I looked back at the door and she was just standing there. It's only been a little over a month, but I honestly have no idea what the fuck I was into. I don't even believe the story of just a girl with a crazy ex based off the factors I told you. It feels like either a robbery or some weird fetishized cuck type thing. I don't know. Definitely something I'm very mad at myself for. I mean, I'm a 9-year Navy vet and I allowed myself to get into a situation like that. I reported her account on the Uber ride back to the bar, and I told the bartender as well if they ever saw her in there again. This has been The Night Shift. If you enjoy this type of content, I post 2+ videos weekly. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow night.